Within the theory of education, there are two opposing views. There's the world of education that looks at students as products that we have to create to form a perfect society, where the student is seen as kind of a blank slate, and that blank slate has to be taught how to live within the society, how to be productive towards the society, and how to be an individual who creates the ultimate cohesion. There's another way of looking at education, and that is each and every student as an individual has a certain potential, and that potential needs to grow. These two opposing views, that of conformity to creating a society versus that of individualism, which focuses on how to better that individual's education and that individual's life. Now there's another diametric dichotomy that exists within the world of education, and that is the difference between obligation versus choice. Is education all about teaching our students how to fulfill their obligations, their obligation towards their teachers, their obligation towards their school, their obligation towards their parents, towards society? Or whether or not the focus is on teaching them how to choose the right things. And the focus is on what they want, be able to channel what they want in the right way. Obviously, these two different questions are very much tied to one another. What's fascinating is the whole story of the Mishkan that happens in Parsha Truma and Tetzaveh is sandwiched between two different types of commandments. At the beginning of building the Mishkan, we have the commandment in Parsha Truma about giving any truma that you want, any amount of money or gold or whatever you feel like giving towards the Mishkan. We want your donation. Give whatever you want. It's more of an expression of nedivut lev, of generosity that comes from within what you want to give, what you want to partake to. That's this mission, this building of the Mishkan. At the end of this week's Parsha, we have the opposite type of donation. Every individual in Am Yisrael has to give exactly half a shekel. No matter how rich or poor you are, it doesn't make a difference who you are, you have to give the same exact amount. And everybody has to give it. There's an obligation, and it's uniform, and nobody gets to choose that I want to do something different. And what I think the Torah, what they're trying to show us is that maybe if we look closely on how to create a proper society, a society that is a Mishkan that God rests upon, maybe these two diametrically different ideals of individual versus conformity, or choice versus obligation, are actually not as far apart as you might think. Very often, people look at an individual as somebody that is the opposite of the universal. It's either the universal needs or the individual needs. What the Torah is trying to tell us over here is that the greatest type of universal society is one in which the individuals feel like they have a different amount and something else to give than everybody else. If everybody is here to give the same thing, then that's a problem. Everybody does have something alike, and everybody is equally obligated. However, there is room to be different, because we look at society as more of a puzzle than we do as a uniform. The puzzle has many different pieces, but all together it creates something more. And that's telling us that to create the proper society, you actually need to focus on the individual. But it tells us as well that in order to value the individual, there needs also to be a purpose of being part of the society. If an individual just on its own, just a puzzle piece sitting on the table or under the couch, what's the point of that? The puzzle piece that sees itself as an individual, part of a bigger whole, that's the greatest sense of individualism and also the greatest sense of collectivism. Now, on the other hand, when we get to the questions of choice versus obligations, there's a fascinating Gemara in Masechet Kedushin that tells us that it's greater to do a mitzvah when you're obligated to do it than it is to do it by choice. Now, in general, we look at things the opposite. Obviously, somebody who chooses to do something does it with much more passion. The Gemara is telling us that there's a con to choice as well. Choice may create passion, however, commandments and obligations create commitment. Passion dwindles, commitment lasts. And the reason why at the beginning of this week's Parsha, we have sandwiched at the end of building the Mishkan the idea of an obligation. It's because at the beginning we had the idea of choice. And hopefully we're able to use both the pros of both of those concepts to create people who are passionate and committed at the same time. The Maharal Miprad writes that even though it's greater to do a mitzvah when you are obligated, mitzuveh v'oseh, than somebody who's not obligated, enu mitzuveh v'oseh, the greatest ideal is to become a person that does mitzvot like an enu mitzveh, like somebody who is not commanded because they're passionate about it, but only to do it when you are obligated to do it. That's synthesizing both of these ideas, which is the bookends of the building the Mishkan. Hopefully we can understand that these two bookends, that of choice versus obligation, versus individualism and universalism, they can dwell together and synthesize to create the place where Hashem is able to dwell in this world. Shabbat Shalom.